Ladies and gentlemen, pay attention. This is your boy, the coach from the WWE. I would like to welcome you to the very first wrestling podcast in the world to take you on a weekly deep dive into classic matches along with legends of the squared circle. Enjoy the discussion. Enjoy the back and forth. There's so much to get into. Ladies and gentlemen, this is The Payoff.
Hey, yo, we're interrupting WrestleMania payoff episodes to do a tribute here for Scott Hall, Razor Ramon, the bad guy, Mr. Machismo himself. And Jeff and I are both very saddened about the news, as I know everyone in the wrestling community is. So we wanted to talk about Scott, talk about one of his famous moments in wrestling. And this will be a fun episode, Jeff, but I'll just start off. I don't know what it was about this one that just feels a little different. My thought or theory, and I'm curious what you think, I don't know if it's because he's just a little bit younger and this was like our guy in the 90s. Even like a Rick Rude or a Mr. Perfect or a Roddy Piper, those are 80s guys. This guy was 90s. This guy came on the scene, in the early 90s, and the big colors and the 90s characters and then the NWO. And so I guess for me, I think that's why this just feels different is, meeting him at a meet and greet and him being, a little bit more of our era. But it just sucks, man. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I think part of it, at least for me, it's we saw the comeback. I think all of us kind of witnessed that followed wrestling for a while here, and it's been openly discussed right now. Like, he had his monsters, he had his demons, and he overcame so much of that. And we saw that firsthand. I mean, it's been a while. I really need to go back and watch the resurrection of Jake the Snake. And while it's not that's Jake's movie and things like that, but Scott came into that as well too, and was having issues. We've seen, the unfortunate videos and stuff like that of, him coming out to the ring and, in various states of whatever, so I think that's why this kind of hit me is one, also it's a freak thing. Dudes took 3 heart attacks, and so, with all this, it was just supposed to be like a hip replacement. So, I think, but like I said, I think what hits me about it is we saw him really come back and be Scott Hall that we all remembered and stuff like that. And so it's just, as you and I get older, we're going to have more and more of this. And it's just sad because these guys were such a major part of celebrities and everything. And people like this happens to, it's just sad because we do feel more of a connection to them. And this one too. And especially in the days since, and we'll talk about it, the outpouring of positive stories. And as always, shit he did behind the scenes that some of us had no clue about, just absolutely incredible. That speaks to who he was. Not while Razor was the character, Scott Hall was a real guy, real person who did a lot of really good things.
Yeah. I mean, it's the good and the bad, but it's interesting because, we see a lot of some of these people, and it's true of celebrities as well, but, you feel like them. You feel like you're connected to them. You feel like you're well informed as to what's going on in their world. The reality is over the past few years, Scott Hall continued to have challenges. Mm-hmm. And, it's, you hear about alcoholism and stuff like that, but the guy had severe depression, and obviously alcohol and other things along the way were mechanisms to cope with that. But the point I'm trying to make is just that you just don't know what people are going through. And, I think sometimes we jump to conclusions. Oh, Scott Hall was on Raw with the NWO. He's doing great. Well, you don't know what's going on. And what we found was going on is that none of those issues went away. The depression, the alcoholism. I mean, he was never able to kick them. And it's just a really tough situation. And a lot of people live like that. It's not just wrestlers. It's not just celebrities, but it's tough. And so I do think that, one of the lessons here is don't assume that you know anything. Don't assume that, so-and-so is doing great. So-and-so doesn't need any help. So-and-so is, perfect. They're not. And so, you can't just assume that. And I think that's the key here is, he still had all those issues. So just because DDP did a documentary, just because, he started to make steps in the right direction, it's an ongoing process. It's something that you deal with your entire life. And don't assume that, again, because someone was at a meet and greet or someone was on national television, that they're okay. And I'm certainly not saying that to badmouth him, but he had a major issue the night before the NWO got inducted into the Hall of Fame. So everyone sees him on TV. Oh, he's perfect. Oh, he's great. Oh, everything. It wasn't. And this was just a person that struggled and struggled his entire life. And it's sad. But a lot of great wrestling moments, a great career, a great legacy. So many people loved the guy, gained value from the guy, loved working with the guy in the ring, got value from him outside the ring with the tips that he gave and the ideas he had. Just an incredible mind for the business. Jeff, you know this, but I did that eat and greet with him at StarCast in Vegas a few years ago. And look, I've done a lot of those types of things over the years. So I've been around these guys. Obviously, we've interviewed a number of them for the podcast. You see a lot of interviews with people. And man, there's just something about that guy that was different. And it was, I don't even know what to compare it to, but imagine, when you talk to someone that you're like, this person's brilliant. Okay. And maybe it's someone that's, brilliant about politics or about the economy or about, some other field, right? Well, this guy was brilliant about pro wrestling, and it was unbelievable. Just you hear that term so often, the psychology of the business, but that's the only time I've actually ever talked to someone or been around someone where I thought, oh, the psychology of the business. I understand what people mean when they say that. Because I think a lot of people say that. I don't think there's many people out there that really, really get it at that level. Jake Roberts seems to be one of those. Scott Hall, Shawn Michaels. So I think a lot of people say, oh, the psychology of the business, but he was really smart. It wasn't just about his matches or his character. I think a lot of people are really good at their character or one style, but he's one of those guys that could sit there and watch, a card or like an NXT card and just have feedback for every single character, male and female. They're working, their gimmicks, their everything. And he was a really, really intelligent person. I could tell that just from an hour of just listening to him. I was blown away. And I've never felt that about anyone else. Most of them, it's like, they're just, they're an old wrestler and, they're telling some great stories, and a lot of it's probably embellished or complete bullshit, but you listen to him and it was just a different conversation.
Yeah. And to your point about like the NXT and like some of the younger people, like there have been a lot of like photos that I've seen, over the last couple of days since this has happened of him just like, he was at the Performance Center a lot of those people that aren't necessarily in NXT anymore. Maybe they're main roster people, but like, taking photos with him, hanging out with him backstage. Like, he was a part of that group, like, with Shawn being NXT and Hunter and all that. Like, he was obviously the Click and all that. And so, yeah, I think that it just really speaks, like you've kind of said, like to the volumes of the mind he had for it. Like we talk a lot, like maybe it wasn't as like notable as like some other people that are out there that are kind of behind the scenes right now and, involved in some of these things that maybe he doesn't get the notoriety that he should for, some of the things that he did do behind the scenes to get like, pro wrestlers to where they are. It was nice seeing, I know I watched most of Raw this week because you and I were kind of curious too what would happen. And it was nice to see some of the wrestlers, especially Kevin Owens, I think went above beyond. He did like the fall away slam in his match. And, a lot of little things, obviously like AO is the big, but yeah, so it was nice to just see the influence, whether it was little things or big things that he had on a lot of these people.
Yeah, we'll keep talking a lot about Scott Hall throughout the episode and his career. Obviously, we're covering a short match and moment, but a really fun one. And Jeff, that to me is one of the biggest. I won't say. I mean, wrestling wise, one of the travesties in this story is that he wasn't in a place personally where he could have moved to Orlando and been at the Performance Center all day. Mm-hmm. And look, I'm sure that at some point it was suggested to him, or at some point, Shawn and Hunter discussed it. And probably, because he wasn't able to, be as professionally reliable as they needed him to be, it probably was never going to happen. But the reality is gosh, you just wonder, okay, if every day he woke up and he had a place to go, the Performance Center, he had people to work with, he could get his creative juices going, could that have helped with his rehabilitation, with him, not being so reliant on alcohol to get through the day? And it's just a shame because it's like I could just see him, 8 hours a day sitting in the Performance Center and just working with people. Mm-hmm. And maybe that would have been enough, but we'll never know. And again, I'm sure that people made that effort. And it sounds like a lot of people tried to do a lot of things for him. He was loved. He was cared about. Obviously there's people that we know about, the Kevin Nashes and the Sean Waltmans of the world. But then there's also people that, I've seen some articles and stuff of some other people that tried really hard that aren't big names or you didn't even know were connected to him. So there was a lot of effort put in, but it's a shame that, if he could have really gotten straight and spent, his full-time, days at the Performance Center, what could have happened. And, you see Shawn Michaels, his handprints are on a lot of those guys. You watch some of those Gargano Ciampa matches and
yeah, I
mean, you're like, dude, Shawn Michaels produced this. This is, Shawn was just sitting there like, oh, and then you're going to do this and that. And
yeah,
I always thought the same with a Scott Hall or a Jake Roberts. Man, if they could just be sitting there, you have this vision of him with like, the toothpick just sitting off to the side, and he physically can't, do these things anymore. But hey, what if you did this? What if you did that? Hey, your character, tilt your head and close your eyes a little. I mean, all that stuff. I mean, the impact he could have had. So it's a shame, we'll never know, but he obviously did help a lot of people along the way. I just wish it could have been on a greater scale. And I wish that perhaps it would have, given him enough of a purpose. Because, people get lonely and depressed, people being by themselves, especially during a pandemic. It's almost
hard on everybody. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough for all of us. So imagine those of us that, have some deeper issues. I mean, imagine what the past couple of years would have been like. So anyways, let's get into the build to this match. It's a short match. We'll cover it. I'm sure after the match, we'll have, more stuff to talk about as well. But
right.
Let's pay tribute to the bad guy and get right into the build.
Oh, it's time for the build.
So Jeff, I have a soft spot in my heart for the Manhattan Center,
yep.
New York City, old school Raws. This is the very beginning of Raw. So this is early on, hour-long episodes, Manhattan Center. Oh, this is going to be so fun to watch and go back.
This is your sweet spot. Yep.
Oh, and as some of you may know, I had the privilege of going to, was it the 25th anniversary of Raw?
Yeah, the crazy
I get confused. The 25th, 1000th, whatever. Yeah, 25th anniversary of Raw a few years ago. So I've been to the Manhattan Center. I love the Manhattan Center. So this, you and I are talking about this. This is a noteworthy show for two reasons. So
right, yeah, crazy.
you had your small little intimate crowd in the Manhattan Center. They start off with a dark match of Bret Hart and Bam Bam Bigelow. So you got Bret Hart winning an 11-minute match. The television show, the Smoking Guns, beat two jobbers, but one of which was Glenn Ruth, who would become one of the headbangers.
Yep.
Then the match we're going to cover takes place. Then friend of the show, Tatanka, thanks for the retweet last week, defeated Scott Taylor in 3 minutes. My comment and the reason Tatanka retweeted it was they were talking about how he and Shawn had a really good match leading up to WrestleMania 9, and I believe Tatanka won in a non-title match. And I just tweeted out, I said, go watch the WrestleMania 9 match. It was a banger. And you and I mean, that was a great match.
Yep.
So Yokozuna would beat Kamala in 3 minutes. That's didn't know they worked together. That's interesting.
That's your bathroom match. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the main event, Marty Gennetti defeating Shawn Michaels to win the Intercontinental Championship. And we are going to cover that match. Is that right?
We got a couple weeks here, but yes, it is absolutely on the list. We're doing a lot of talked about, but it's time to cover it. So that's one. Yep. In about 4 weeks, we got that one ready.
All right. So talk about Scott.
Yep.
And talk about how we got to this match.
Yeah. So Scott, a little bit of history on him, born in Maryland, 1958, just kind of bounced around a whole lot of different places before really kind of landing in WWF at the time. Actually had some different tryouts for WWF as well, too. And so, but it was 1984 in NWA. And actually, one of his first feuds was with Dusty Rhodes, interestingly enough. He trained with Dan Spivey, or actually, the two of them trained together, actually, and primarily under Dusty. And so what you get, though, is these guys kind of working together in like some of the Jim Crockett territories and them debuting, great tag team name right here. They were the American Starship. You had Scott Hall, his ring name was Starship Coyote, and Dan Spivey's name was Starship Eagle, which, like, come on, like, American Academy is one thing, but American Starship, like, I need an American Starship shirt. I'm sure I would hope one's out there, but that's classic right there. It has been crazy seeing some of these. I'm sure you've seen them too. The really old photos of him that are like fucking black and white, right? And he's got that giant mustache and like just huge. You could tell it was his days when he was just in the gym, like every day, just getting jacked. So he actually had a tryout at a house show in August 1987. He got a second tryout. It was actually at Wrestling Challenge taping in 1990. And so while he got beat by Paul Roma, he did not get signed at that time either. So it's kind of crazy. Like he'd been around for, at this point, 7 years, not getting signed and things like that. It took until 1992 when he was finally signed, or would finally join the WWF as Razor Ramon. And so the story that I'd heard it before and I kind of researched it again, and who knows like where the truth lies in this. It's one of those things of that it was Razor that came up with the idea of going with this is, the classic movie Scarface, kind of like, Tony Montana, like that Razor character, or actually the Ramon character, that first made his first appearance was actually a dark match.
By the way, Vince originally wanted him to be a modern G.I. Joe.
Yes. Yeah. And that was part of it too. And so his first appearance was a dark match on Wrestling Challenge against Chris Hahn in May of 1992. And so this was a little bit before the kind of Razor character, but then getting that, they actually thought it was a joke from what I read, like Vince McMahon, Pat Patterson, like there was also out there too, they didn't actually know what Scarface was. Like they hadn't seen him. They thought that like Hall had just come up with this character on his own. And that he was going to be a part of this, and like, you know, the convert, like we've all seen the vignettes and like this week and you know, things like that of him in the convertible, you know, arm kind of driving, like, you know, the leopard skin and things like that, like straight out of the movie and stuff like that. And so, but like I said, although taken right from the film, Hall claims McMahon and Patterson were nevertheless floored by the idea and called him a genius. And so, hey, like, but you could see that though. Like if you had never heard of Scarface and then someone pitched me this character as a wrestler, I'd be like, sign this guy up. Like that was just like so good of like how he came up with it. So, but then it was actually McMahon who added the Razor to it so that he would have a nickname and things like that. And so, you know, trying to come up, it actually, the suggestion of I read that it was actually like Tito Santana that actually helped him come up with the Ramon, and then kind of having that and kind of going with that. And so it just stuck. And so, and kind of having that. So it was actually, he made it the debut while he had that kind of, I say the May 1992 match. He actually debuted, and as I've learned this week too, it was August 8th, 1992 on an episode of Superstars, defeating a jobber of Paul Van Dale, who we have learned this week that I did not know is Carmella's father. And so using the Razor's Edge, which previously a bunch of different names when he was Diamond Death Drop in WCW, but beating him in his first match for that. And so just crazy, the connections, like I didn't know that Carmella's father was a wrestler and things like that until this week. And so here we are. I just thought she was the star of a really bad YouTube show. So, you know, how many dick jokes can you cram into 12 minutes? But it just, you know, that. So Hall has actually said since like he had that match against that he was actually happy to have a match against someone that was invested still in wrestling. He kind of said he was happy he didn't have a disinterested WWF veteran jobber like Virgil. So like, you know, he was really glad to have someone and kind of do, this was Lightning Kid. And so kind of jumping ahead on here. So yeah, Lightning Kid, as you will, having this match against Luis, day after WrestleMania 9, like we talked about, against Louis Spicolli. He was happy to have a match against Spicolli, who, like, you know, was someone that, again, not Virgil, someone that he was able to get. Now, he had a bunch of different names. So you had the Lightning Kid, you had Kamikaze Kid, you had the Kid, you had the Cannonball Kid. But before this match, and while we say it a lot, he's 1, 2, 3 Kid. He was not the 1, 2, 3 Kid going into this match. And so, but kind of having the debut, it was May 3rd. And so it was like, you know, really 45 days after his debut where he gets this match with Razor. Really no rhyme or reason for why it kind of happened. You figured, I mean, it's at the top of the card on a random like Raw at the Manhattan Center, which, yeah, everyone's probably way more interested in what's about to happen with Marty Gennetti and Shawn Michaels. And then you get this. And so it really just kind of drops in your lap for what kind of happens here. And we'll get into it. It's really all there is. Yeah.
Well, I'm pumped to cover it. We are at the 16-minute mark of the May 17th, 1993 Raw. 16 minutes, season 1, episode 17. Jeff, are you ready?
Season 1. Let's do this.
All right. You know the drill, buddy. It's time for the payoff.
Oh, it's time for the payoff.
Back up to action. Anything can happen here on Monday night.
We got
Let's go sliding into town now.
use this term loosely, the Raw girl. Razor coming out looking like $1 million. He's right off to the left there. That's my spot where I stood for Raw 25. I gotta go back and watch Raw 25 when he came out. I can't remember if that was on TV or if that was part of the dark match.
So you've got the Kid as they're introducing him because he was going a little bit by Laredo Kid too.
Laredo Kid, Lightning Kid.
Yeah, you could see on his trunks it says L Kid for Lightning Kid. So he's got that. I did appreciate this because normally I don't watch the matches, but this one was so short I had to go back. I love his ring gear, Razor's ring gear. Like both of them. Great. Like telling the story. Yeah, he's got the razors on the trunks, on his elbow pads too, like little things. Like Lightning Kid, he's got lightning. Like, it's rare to see this type of stuff anymore. And so like kind of, selling their character this way.
Toothpick in the face. Now, Jeff,
in the face, yeah.
Everyone's standing.
Already doing better than he ever has.
Yeah, everyone.
And
look at the disparity in the size here, this youngster. Oh, my.
From what I understand, Waltman was super over with this crowd because he had wrestled a few times before in front of them, but he was kind of an indie sensation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And this was really like, he had not done a lot to this point. Like, it's weird. Like, this is, and again, like we know him by all kinds of different names now, but like, this was his infancy, like just getting going. And like, he's wrestling against Razor. Now we'll talk about in the aftermath too, like mixed, like they knew, like there's conspiracies out there of like, oh, he wasn't supposed to win or, it like just crazy. But like he said, like, no, this was the plan for a while. Like, a lot of people that matter have come out and said like, no, it's bullshit.
No, they built Kid up over a period of time to get to this point. I mean, they knew that this was what they were going to do.
Right.
Jeff, I feel like I'm in the minority on this based on what I've read recently, but I actually prefer Razor Ramon over Scott Hall.
Okay.
I'm just a massive like Razor Ramon fan. Like just, I don't know. Again, you mentioned the tights, the character. I just love this era. I mean, even more than like the NWO Scott Hall, if you can believe that.
Yeah, I think they did such a great job with him. He had the fall away slam him a few minutes ago, a couple seconds ago. It's a short match. Absolutely. And I can get that because in this too, like this was as we've said before, the larger than life character. Here we go. Going up to the top. Gets it.
He got him. Can't believe he beat Razor Ramon.
And the kid. And he's gone back through the curtain and Razor beside himself. And the reaction from the crowd, everyone on their feet, like you said, again.
What happened, brother? Hey, you got beat, brother. What happened? No, brother, you got beat. He beat you. What happened? What happened? Where's the referee? Where's the kid? Back as we continue. I don't understand what's going on here. Come on,
So good.
You got a fast count.
So good.
Oh, just classic. It really is.
I mean, the crowd, the surprise, you have Macho, you have Bobby Heenan. Oh,
yeah.
Really, really good.
All right, let's get into the aftermath. Yeah.
At that point, Savage had already feuded with Razor. That was the Flair, Warrior, Perfect, all that stuff.
Yep.
They brought him in pretty high too, because he was in that mix right away, kind of with Flair.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's continue the conversation and get into the aftermath.
Ho! It's time for the aftermath.
Here's what I noticed on this one. So obviously, the kid got the win, and this is why I really wanted to pick this match over any kind of other match it's the old, like Scott did not have to do what he did. And so this is one of those, like he put the young guy over. It still looks strong. Like it was crazy. Like, cause at the time, this was not something that happened a lot of like, really a jobber kind of goes over this way. And so the fact that he did what he did, he still looks strong. I mean, 1, 2, 3 didn't even get to celebrate. Like he was back through the curtain and like they're announcing him as the winner, and Scott Hall, the one is in the center of the ring, like, just kind of beside himself and kind of doing this. And so I think it speaks even back then to the character that he had not the character, like, as a person, not the character, but like that he had to say, hey, yep, I'm going to help him out. He obviously saw a lot. And then we know in this, we'll talk about in a sec, like, he kept working with him 1, 2, 3 at this point. And so, yeah, I think that it was funny. There was no offense for him until it happened. And then it was a really fun match. I didn't know what to like, you see like we have a list of like the best matches under 5 minutes and you're like, oh God, like what's going to happen? Like that was a fun one and it was under 3 minutes. So yeah.
Well, and keep in mind too, that, you weren't seeing a lot of moonsaults then. So that was kind of unique. Yeah. They had built up the kid kind of being this little, fun character, indie sensation, whatever you want to call him. The other thing too is, and you'll get into this, but not long after this, Razor's now a good guy. Yes. So we were able to create a new star. We were able to transition from a heel to a baby face for Razor. And obviously that took off and he did some great stuff. It was a really interesting set of events, and it was cool. And I mean, again, this is, it's tough because, Scott Hall, arguably one of the best of all time that never was a world champion. But in this era, back half of 92, 93, 94, 95, he was one of the biggest stars in the company. Never held the world title, but big time, one of the better Intercontinental champions of all time. Killer heel, killer baby face. He was just underneath that, headliner. Not that he didn't headline some shows, but he only got that one world title shot against Bret Hart. But, a lot of, secondary, second to the top matches. And he was, for a lot of it, the second biggest heel or the second biggest baby face.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So just briefly on this one, like you said, they actually did feud a little bit here. There was the kind of money that was staked on this one. It was $2,500, then $5,000, then finally $10,000 to kind of have a rematch. He did accept the challenge, but then he kind of grabbed the money and ran away. And who had also, like, the $1 Million Man was feuding with Razor at the time, who ended up $1 Million Man staying the heel on this one. Which it actually, like, because DiBiase was saying that Razor, or he was taunting the kid, or taunting Razor because of losing to a nobody. And so that upset the 1, 2, 3 kids, so that he actually went on to upset DiBiase as well too. And so that was interesting. So then after that is when you get the face turn, like you talked about. Actually 1, 2, 3 making his pay-per-view debut is at SummerSlam. Losing to IRS after Razor beat DiBiase on this one. So really kind of tight build there. I'd like to go back and kind of review that as well too, and talk about that because there's some good storytelling there. And then you had them on the same team at Survivor Series, actually winning with your buddy Marty and the 1, 2, 3 kid kind of, eventually because of that match, having a little bit of a tag team and actually winning the tag belts for like about a week. So kind of interesting how that played out. So, so this one, it's just kind of, tight little build for, kind of aftermath as well too on this one. It's just kind of fun to see how it played out, and it made a ton of sense too, within the storyline. And, it's interesting. I really think along the same lines of, like, you put these veteran guys with, veteran guys with the younger guys to help put them over, whether we realized it at the time or not. That's exactly what he was doing. I know, you hear a lot about gripes about, like, you're kind of seeing that happen nowadays and stuff like that, but you put Tully Blanchard with FTR and, they just fired him and stuff like that, but you got that angle. Like, Sting just walking out with Darby Allin gives credibility to Darby Allin, whether he needs it or not. And so I think kind of having that pairing is just really great to kind of see that. Like, do Mox and Daniel Bryan need, William Regal to go over? Absolutely not. But after watching this, it does make me think, okay, who are they going to put over? Even like Yuta, and like this week at like Regal slapping him immediately. Like, you got the crowd chanting Wheeler Yuta's name. You've got, like, immediately he's on your brain of just like, okay, like it's really kind of like this it really kind of had me reanalyzing, like, God, like Scott Hall helping some of these guys get over this way. Like, where's it happening in other spots? It's happening, whether we realize it or not. And so I think that's just really cool what he did and his contribution to that. So I did find a little, go ahead.
Yeah, it was interesting you bring up Sting and Darby because they were coming out on Wednesday night. It was during that Hardy's match. And I'm like, man, we're going to look back and be like, that was like a 2, 3, 4 year run of Sting and Darby. And it got us some great Sting moments at a time where we never thought he'd wrestle again. And then it made Darby. Like, those two could just do that for 4 years and Sting could call it quits and Darby's a made man. And what a great pairing that is.
Dude, motherfucker's 62 years old. Like,
and he's doing shit that he didn't do in his 20s. He wasn't diving off balconies at 25.
Well, and he's in this sidebar, but like, he has squashed he needs to be protected and stuff like that because dude is out there doing stuff that you and I can only dream of. So
yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah, sit on the couch. People got no room to talk about this and what.
It frustrates you that when he was at a previous company, they couldn't figure out a way to get him over.
Yeah, I know. So, okay. So you've got, this is 1993. You got Razor was 87 on the PWI. You had the Kid at 34. Actually, I don't know why Razor was so high. I don't know if he just didn't wrestle a whole lot or what, but so at the time the write up there was on the Observer newsletter on this one, said Shawn Waltman, this time simply wrestling as the Kid, scored the first jobber upset in WWF history. I've been waiting 7 years to see someone introduce a new star in this manner by pitting Razor Ramon. It was set up as a typical squash and Kid selling every big move. And after Ramon missed a move, Kid did a moonsault body block off the top rope for the pin. Waltman, who had worked as Kamikaze Kid and Cannonball Kid on the previous 2 shows in doing total squash jobs for Doink and Mr. Hughes, got in no offense again before his pinning move. So, and they even alluded to it on the announce team. I think Bobby the Brain kind of made a comment like, what are we calling the Kid this week? Or Macho said it, Vince, and so they kind of played it off a little like, they didn't know what the hell they were calling him at this time. And so just kind of funny. And so, before we get into our kind of payoff scores on this one, I think you and I both have some kind of lists here of the greatest kind of Scott Hall matches. And so I think it's just notable, especially, and kind of remembering him to kind of remember this. And the list I have, of course, number 1, this is based on the cagematch.net ratings. So, kind of fans ranking it, things like that. You've, of course, got the WrestleMania 10 match coming in as the number 1 on this one. Coming in just above at number 2, the SummerSlam 95 ladder match. And so, yes, their first one, which makes sense to me. The first one was the bigger one. One that we have talked about on this show before then, coming in at number 3, you had the Diesel and Shawn Michaels versus Razor in the 1, 2, 3 Kid match. That was on Action Zone, which we have covered that one. Of course, as well, too, the Scott Hall, the Bash at the Beach match. Like that would be number 4 on this one and kind of the big moments and things like that. So, kind of having that. Number 5, one, I think we may have to add, I've added some of these to the list since you had the NWO and NWO Sting versus Arn Anderson, Lex Luger, and Ric Flair and Sting. And so that was a Fall Brawl in the War Games match, actually. And then coming in at number 6, you had Razor Ramon versus Rick Martell. That was actually a couple of months after this one on Monday Night Raw. He had some New Japan matches in there as well, too. Kind of a callback to this one. He had Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, and 6, of course, 1, 2, 3, X-Pac, versus Kevin Green, Ric Flair, and Roddy Piper. That was Slamboree 1997. Part of the big one on this one is everybody kind of the 6-man, heel and Hall and Nash kind of working together at this one, and is the Outsiders. You had a Royal Rumble 93 Razor Ramon versus Bret Hart match, and so another great one as well, too. And the last one I have on my match was actually Razor and Ric Flair versus Mr. Perfect and Randy Savage from Survivor Series 1992. Not one I had remembered. But again, like just the names alone, you think, hey, like, well, I got to check that one out and kind of see what's going on that one, because just interesting. It really what it boils down to. So yeah. And that match, that Survivor Series 1992 match, got a 3 and 2 or 3 1/4 stars. So like, that ain't bad. Actually, it was actually one of the better matches on that card other than Brett Shawn. So yeah.
Well, another, and I looked at a couple other lists and came up with similar stuff, but the one that I certainly didn't remember happening, it was at TNA Lockdown, I believe in 2010. It was Hall and Nash against the Dudleys. Maybe we put that on the list. That'd be a fun one to watch, but I heard it was a really good match, and it was probably the last, really good match of his career. So that'd be a fun one to cover at some point.
Yeah.
Cool.
You got a score, Tom? We even want to score this? What do you want to do here?
Yeah, let's score it objectively. Based on the moment, based on what it did. I'm gonna give this, and again at the time, and let me because I don't think this can be stated enough. At the time, this was a really big deal.
Yeah. Okay,
this didn't happen. It happened here. It happened with Barry Horowitz, but and Horowitz was actually 2 years later. So this was like. This just did not happen ever. It made a new star, 1, 2, 3 Kid. I mean, think about this. No, he never headlined a WrestleMania, but this is a guy that was around for decade and a half or whatever. I mean, 1, 2, 3 Kid, X-Pac, NWO, DX, multiple time Hall of Famer. I mean, okay, so this was like his coming out party, almost his debut. This makes him a star. We had never seen an upset like this before. So that's a major deal. Hall, he becomes a bigger star. He becomes a babyface, and goes off and does great things. And arguably he was a babyface the entire time he was with the NWO, especially when he debuted. So, think of what happened. Is there an NWO without Hall being a big enough star? Would he have been a big enough star without this moment and then becoming a babyface that people could love? This is a bigger thing than we realize. So for all of that, I'm actually giving this an 8 because big moment led to a lot of things. And I don't know, if this never happens, do they strike up a friendship? Does X-Pac ever become DX NWO? Does the NWO ever get formed? Because I don't know if the demand for Scott Hall would have been there if he was just a mid-card heel. But because he had become so over and you knew he could be a heel and a babyface, and he had this long run prior to, Bischoff throwing a bunch of money at him and getting him to jump. I don't know. I mean, does all of that happen without this? We'll never know, but it's definitely not a guarantee. So this is actually bigger than you probably realize. What about you, Jeff?
Yeah, I'm actually sitting at an 8 too. Different reasons though. I think it was because, like I've said a little bit already, it was how, Scott Hall kind of did what he did. And so, and got him over and didn't have to. And so that was a big part of it. He lost like none of his momentum. That's such a big part of what we talk about, of like taking the loss or something like that. Still, it's so hard to book that nowadays, but man, how they booked this was damn near perfection, of kind of how he got him over and things like that. And so, and then kind of working with him, kind of continuing to mentor him. And before the internet age, so we didn't know kind of how, and, them working together like they did, weren't necessarily putting all that together, but I think just kind of how he did it for, Sean Waltman and kind of helping him and stuff like that. Like, man, like you can only ever hope to have a situation like that in wrestling and to get over that way, because we know what the payoff is, and we know, the outpouring that we've seen for him this week, and even, from Hall, from Nash, from Waltman, from Bret Hart's too was, I don't know if you read that one or not, but him talking about like, man, it just sucks losing these people. Like, it just doesn't feel right. And so, and Nash agreeing with him. And so, I think, like you said, his impact, I don't think we'll fully recognize his impact. It's almost too soon to kind of understand the kind of wider scope. And we're going to still hear stories. Like even every day we're hearing more and more stories come out. I just saw actually a video this morning of Hall and Nash talking about like they were in a car ride together and how they became friends and stuff like that. And Hall kept like touching Nash's leg and stuff like this. And he's like, dude, this dude is either going to be my best friend forever or he's going to beat my ass. And so like, just kind of like being bros in the cars, like trying to, see what happens. And so I'm with you on an 8 on this one. And I wish I could give it a 10 because of what he did. But yeah, I think that's where I'm going to sit on this one. As a guy, I'd give him a 10. Absolutely. So as a bad guy, I'd give him a 10. So, all right. All right, Tom, let's send him home. I'm glad we did this episode, especially, like you said, unfortunate kind of how it happened, but you and I pivoted a little bit here to kind of, honor him because it just kind of felt right with especially all the kind of news that was out there and just doing a quick match for him. Like, this is the way to go.
Agreed. It was all your idea. It was a great idea.
There you go.
Hope everyone enjoyed this. Hope everyone is getting to watch some great Scott Hall moments and matches this week. As always, we appreciate you listening. Hit us at Payoff Pod. Love Twitter. Love tweeting. Love hearing what everyone has to say. So thank you as always, and we'll see you next week on an all-new episode of The Payoff.